response to my set verb of juxtapose, I will be focusing on domestic abuse and how the victim is portrayed behind closed doors to the outside. To begin my research, I generated a mind map with hidden emotions felt by the victim of domestic abuse. My next slide shows secondary images which I felt were inspiring and reflected my direction of the contrasting sides to a victim. For example, in the top right corner it shows one half of a woman which is broken and bruised. On the other side, it shows the woman appearing happy and fine to others. This slide informs my project and presents my reasoning and concept behind doing it. Furthermore, reveals my starting point at looking at a campaign named Summy Against Domestic Abuse, which gave me a powerful tagline of isolating, not isolated. I could potentially use this quotation through hand embroidery or refer back to it throughout my work. I felt investigating the different forms of domestic abuse was important, as stereotypically we perceive domestic abuse as just physical. However, it is much more than that and can affect people emotionally. Therefore, it is easier for the victim to hide the impacts of domestic abuse as it cannot be seen. Here I presented 2 sources of research I found to educate and inform myself further on domestic abuse and how it affects people and how to prevent it. To prevent it, I read a training manual written by Anne Speckard. This consisted of 119 pages in which I wrote many notes from, such as that women are seen as peacekeepers and danger is put on them because of the expectations on them. From the interview, I learnt the red flags of a domestic abuse relationship and how this woman's personal experience with dealing with a violent partner. For my next source of research, I read into a news article published by the Bolton News which revealed an art exhibition in which women from community groups formed to sew powerful messages into fabrics. I felt this was inspiring as the messages were motivational and something which I could take part in. Moreover, after watching the documentary Spotlight, I learned how domestic abuse cases has changed during lockdown and more about the campaign named Women's Aid. In this slide, I proposed 2 more sources of research which helped me become more knowledgeable on domestic abuse, such as the podcast by Relationships Shouldn't Hurt, which expressed how domestic abuse cases are affected during the festive season. For example, the cases increase as more people are spending time at home. The interview published by The Guardian informed me on more red flags and how murderers go unrecognised. Here I have generated a family and friends questionnaire which allowed me to collect primary research to see if my friends and family were able to define the word domestic abuse and emotional abuse. I felt this was relevant to my project to see if people knew that domestic abuse comes in different forms other than physical. The results showed that most people understood the meaning of domestic abuse, however, people did not know the definition of emotional abuse. For my next 2 questions, I asked them to define the words financial abuse and physical abuse. The results varied as 12 out of 12 people understood the definition of physical abuse. However, for financial abuse, 5 answered no, showing my prediction to be correct that most people would understand what physical abuse was, as it talked about more and can be seen. Another source of research I gathered was posters. I felt this was informative towards my project as it provided me with effective imagery and taglines such as "A home should never feel like a prison," which I could potentially take in the future and add to outcomes using techniques such as screen printing and hand embroidery. I have also included a voiceover which talks about what I can take from these posters and what I like from them. Moreover, by including a voiceover, I am exploring the 4D element. This slide is different to the others as I began to bring in artisan designs which I felt reflected my idea. The idea behind this slide is the impact of physical abuse, therefore I looked into the different stages of a bruise. Furthermore, from this I formed a colour palette using an app named Adobe Capture. This ranged in vibrant and neutral tones. While investigating the stage of a bruise, I came across an artist named Brian Kim, whose work inspired me due to his colour palette to form different bruises. Therefore, my next slide delved into his work and the style in which he works in. I like the fact that this artist collects a variety of skin tones through sitters, which are people or strangers who go to him and allow him to capture their skin tones adding to his work. In my future projects, I could work within the style of his work by working within a diverse colour palette of skin tones or through painting bruises. Moreover, I've included a voiceover in the bottom right hand corner which explains why Brian Kim's work is inspiring to me and how his work could influence mine. For my next slide, I practice working within the style of Brian Kim's work. However, I use watercolour as a medium and research into the colour wheel to understand which colours would blend effectively to form my bruise designs. I worked out different colour relationships and techniques in order for the watercolour to appear like a bruise. For example, a dabbing technique to show where the blood has clotted. After coming across Mozambique Fashion Week when identifying the different stages of a bruise, I decided to research into this in more depth as it relates to my chosen direction of domestic abuse due to the torn garments and bruises which can be seen on the models' faces. However, within the fashion show, some of the models are wearing simple clothing with no bruises. I like this as it shows domestic abuse is not just physical and can't always be seen. I have further included a voiceover which states how the garments shown within the Fashion Week influenced mine. A designer who I researched into was Alexander McQueen due to his collection The Highland Rape, initially capturing my eye. This is due to the appeal of the garments he has produced. For example, many of them are torn and slashed, showing signs of mistreatment. However, as Alexander's context does not match mine of domestic abuse, I can still take inspirations from his designs, for example, techniques and materials. Again, I have included a voiceover stating how Alexander's work could influence mine and how it relates to my project. A second artist who I looked at was Darina Barikina. I felt her work was influential and related to my chosen direction of domestic abuse and how the victim is portrayed from the outside to the inside, as it shows a woman peeling away a mask which is concealing the truth compared to what is being hidden underneath, which is bruising and scarring. This shows a victim to be almost putting on a front to others. Moreover, I have also included a sketch which I constructed in the style of this artist's work and a voiceover explaining how these designs could impact my work in the future. This slide shows another way in which something can appear differently in the outside to the inside. For example, my first drawing of a leaf showed a contrast due to one side being decayed and dead and the other looking healthy yet starting to show where the leaf was ill on the other side. This could resemble how the victim's lies are beginning to surface and show through. I have also included a colour palette inspired by my sketches and a voiceover explaining the meaning behind them. For my technique research, I was inspired by certain designers and events which I had looked at previously on my PowerPoint, such as Alexander McQueen and his collection, The Highland Rape, and the Mozambique Fashion Week. I liked how each of the garments looked mistreated due to the different techniques used, for example, tearing and slashing, which show the fabric to be in a vulnerable position. Moreover, I would also like to investigate how hand embroidery to show powerful messages which I have gained from poster research. Represented on this slide was 3 colour palettes which I constructed from Pantone swatches. The theme for my first colour palette was the different stages of a bruise, therefore arranged in vibrant colours to deep colours. My second colour palette was inspired by Brian Kim's work due to the diverse range of skin tones. Lastly, my third colour palette symbolises a dark and gloomy nature, therefore I have used deep and demonic colours. Within my bibliography, I have included all of the links to the voiceovers I have created to go into more depth on certain slides. I have also included